An Edinburgh park, a green oasis of tranquility. But notwithstanding appearances, this woman is a suspected terrorist. As she keeps an eye on her dog Dougal, we ask, who's watching Mrs. L? Glasgow University, where animal rights campaigners last month claimed shame on the seat of learning that keeps up a research link condemned a decade ago. I'm George Hume. Tonight, Scottish Reporters looks at the dark cloak of secrecy that shrouds animal experimentation and testing in Scotland. We ask, who wins in a world of intrigue, suspicion, terrorism and infiltration? Who is watching Mrs. L? Have animal rights become a civil rights issue? Ten years ago, Keller's treatment of baboons at the University of Pennsylvania's Head Injuries Clinical Research Centre brought international outrage, a halt to the work and a fine on the university. Glasgow University collaborated in these experiments and defended the work. Today, regardless of that embarrassing involvement, Glasgow University is again working hand in hand with the scientists from Penn University. Toward the end of 1993, a report entitled Cities of Shame claimed that Edinburgh and Glasgow were among the busiest centres for animal experimentation and testing in the United Kingdom. You might not have known that, but that's not your fault, because the animal testing and experimenting industry is very keen to keep a low profile. Companies busy in the business of testing pharmaceuticals often also handle other products closer to the commercial cutting edge of a redder lipstick and a greener supermarket pea. There are many such laboratories throughout the United Kingdom, and Scotland has its fair share. All plead commercial confidentiality and demand anonymity when it comes to the question of who does what with animals. The government says, don't worry, the Home Office inspectorate is there to look after the public's interest, and that of the laboratory animals too. But the charity, Advocates for Animals, argues, not so.
I think at face value and open to the public, they would seem to be tough. Our criticisms of them are that there's only 21 Home Office inspectors, men and women, to cover the whole of Britain. Now we're talking of nearly 3 million experiments every year going on in 400 research laboratories by something in the region of 15 to 18,000 scientists. How on earth can they make sure everything is going on well? How can we be sure, for example, that they're coming down hard on these scientists?
The new weapon in the hands of animal rights campaigners is the video camera. Infiltrate an activist with a camera, and any guilty secrets which a laboratory may have are secrets no longer.
But you see, by now having the power of the video camera, which allows us maybe to get people inside laboratories, i.e. by getting a job within them, the scientific community and the Home Office cannot deny what is on video film. The Home Office inspectors knew that was going on and they did nothing about it. And they were in his laboratory 28 times, and anyone only needed to be in his laboratory for a few minutes, as I was, and he fell asleep in front of me. He couldn't remember from one minute to the next what he was about to do or what he had to do. Now, the Home Office inspectors must have turned a blind eye to that sort of nonsense. So therefore, I regret to say, as an organisation that supported the new legislation on animal experiments, we're bitterly disappointed at what the Home Office inspectorate are doing to protect laboratory animals in this country.
These are the laboratories of Inverness Research International, one of East Lothian's biggest employers. There's about 530 people work here. They carry out testing on a wide range of products, some of them pharmaceuticals, others simple day-to-day products like propellant gases for things like aerosol cans, kind of stuff you would find in your home. For most of these experiments, they use rats, dogs, and monkeys. Bridget Wilkins is a veterinary student in Edinburgh. Last summer she applied for a job at Inverness and was pleased to get a letter inviting her for interviews.
Well, I made an application to Inverness Research Centre as an animal technician because I had welfare concerns about the animals, the way in which the animals they were using were being kept, and also the experiments which they were doing. And I wanted to see for myself and convince myself as to what was going on.
All set to do her best in interview at Inverness, and frank about her intention to keep a keen eye on animal welfare there, Bridget Wilkins got a second letter from Inverness. It told her, bluntly, you need not come.
I took it that an error had been made, so I asked them, was this an error, or was the letter correct, and had the interview actually been cancelled? And I was told that yes, the interview had been cancelled and wouldn't go ahead, and the reason for that was that the Research Defence Society had given information to Inverness which they felt that by employing me they would be constituting a security risk.
Branded and undesirable by the Research Defence Society. But just who are they? The RDS, like Advocates for Animals, has been in the thick of the argument about animal testing for almost a century. Its membership includes testing laboratories, research institutes and universities. Its primary purpose, says the RDS, is to counter the animal rights argument, to set out clearly the benefits of research to mankind and animals alike. Also, they keep a keen eye on the opposition.
Right now, we are in the middle of the biggest letter bomb campaign that they have ever had. There have been something like 34 letter bombs since October 1993 up until January of 94, and that's the biggest campaign we've seen to date.
Now, you yourselves have been on the receiving end of a bomb.
Well, it was sent out just before Christmas, and it was contained in one of these standard post office purchased mailing tubes. 13 of them, however, contained a few ounces of explosive and a triggering device and a number of syringe needles. Yeah, these were really very nasty devices designed to injure quite badly or blind someone.
Now, many people listening to this program may find it incomprehensible, quite unbelievable, that an organization such as yours, at the center of the argument, does not maintain a register of intelligence of names and activists and disseminate these to interested parties.
The best lists that we've ever seen actually are kept by the animal rights movement themselves, who produce quite comprehensive lists of their own supporters and organisations. And there is quite a labyrinthine set of small animal rights groups around the country.
Do you keep records of their records then, as published?
Oh, we've got copies of all the things they publish, and I think these things are freely available. And it's not something we've ever often had resource and need to use.
So in effect, you do have a reference system at no cost to yourselves?
Absolutely, as anyone can purchase from the animal rights movement.
But just a minute. How was the RDS, or any research laboratory for that matter, able to make the not inconsiderable leap that linked the 15-year-old Bridget Wilkins from Nottingham with the 28-year-old Bridget Wilkins, veterinary student living in Edinburgh, 250 miles and 14 years apart?
She had also applied to more than one other research laboratory as well known as an animal rights activist. Some of these companies picked up that she was listed in more than one place as an animal rights activist, as a leader of a local animal rights group, as a contact person for a national animal rights group, and they obviously refused to even consider her for the job, since from her application she was concealing the fact that she was an animal rights activist, and obviously one assumes therefore trying to get the job with evil intent.
How did you know that she was an animal rights activist?
Well, because one of the companies that picked her up this way made no secret of it and told several people it was regarded as something of a joke that she'd been so silly.
If you had in mind a particular job which you wanted to do, then you would send off multiple applications, just as if you wanted to work in a certain field with a certain company, you'd send to several of those companies that you knew, either within your area or countrywide.
Does it suggest anything to you as to why Inverness were able to say to you 48 hours after they had written to you and said, yes, please come and have an interview, that other people, in addition to Dr. Matfield's organisation, had been in touch with them? What does that suggest to you?
Well, it does seem that there's perhaps some central organisation which is disseminating information to the different research organisations on people who they see to be a security risk.
We're not an intelligence unit. There is a police intelligence unit which looks at the animal rights extremists, but they, although they are able to advise some organisations which are the target of the animal rights extremists, they mostly work by liaising with other police forces. We, through experience over the years, obviously know some of the names.
It is the career which I want to go into, and I want to use that career in veterinary medicine very positively towards ends for animals, and I don't want to feel that I have been blacklisted.
We contacted Inverness and were courteously received, but they had nothing to say, nothing to hide, and no, we could not film there. This is a copy of the list of animal rights contacts which the RDS says the experimentation industry uses to sniff out potential infiltrators. It makes very interesting reading. Among the alleged subversives, for example, are Bute Island Foods, the Orkney Seal Rescue, and a dog rescue organisation. We used the same list to get in touch with Scotland's animal campaigners. Oh, hello, it's George Hume, Scottish Reporters. We uncovered a nasty campaign of surveillance and found that no matter how innocent a stall of leaflets in Glasgow's Sauchiehall Street might seem, a sharp eye is being kept, even on the kind-hearted.
The more I found out, the more horrified I became, and I felt so guilty about that. I thought, I shall dedicate the rest of my life to trying to help them. So I do it on a voluntary, unpaid basis, and I've made the firm commitment. I think to myself sometimes at night, I may not be much, my little friends, but you've got me for life, and that's the way I feel about it.
Do you find ever that you have other little friends standing out there with cameras that you don't know much about?
Well, I do get my photograph taken really quite frequently now. They may be admirers, but somehow I don't think so. And I do wonder sometimes, you know, what files I appear on, and you know, I'm totally dedicated to lawful and peaceful campaigning, and any organisation I help or support is also, they're very well respected and very law-abiding. And I do wonder, you know, you see sort of people sneaking up and snapping you, and you think, what is it all about, you know?
So who's taking the photo? I mean, describe them. Are they middle-aged gents? Or
yes, usually men, people who seem to come just with the intention of photographing you, and then they nip off again before you can say, you know, why are you doing this? So it does, I must say, it does cause me some concern. I would be very, very upset to think I was looked upon as a possible subversive, because, as I say, I'm totally dedicated to peaceful campaigning, and I don't really know why I should be on any such list. And it would upset me, particularly if I thought, you know, might be used against me, which would be unbelievably unfair, really.
Spies, sneaky photos for a blacklist, counter-espionage. It does seem unlikely, but not so. Last year, a number of Hunt protesters in the borders found that their names and addresses had been leaked to huntsmen, the trace made through the number plates on their cars. Members of the Buccleuch Hunt had the full picture on the Hunt Saboteurs, chapter and verse, in, one might think, just the way that police would get the information through the comprehensive but confidential computer data held on a national police file.
Huntsman approached the car and went down the window to speak to him, and he said he was just chatting away, and then he said, well, you don't look like a Mrs. Kirkpatrick to me. And somebody else in the car said, what does she look like? And he said, I believe this car is registered to Mrs. Kirkpatrick. And then he said my mother's address as well. And after that we were like, well, how did he get that address? I'm fairly sure it was the police. They've not ever offered any viable alternative of how they got the address.
Not too bad for us as well.
I think it's quite frightening that the police are willing to hand out, I mean, as far as they know, I was a single woman and they were quite happy to hand out my address. As it happens, I wasn't living there at the time, but my mother was living alone, and they were quite happy to hand out a single woman's address. And considering all the crimes against women, I think that's ridiculous on that level as well.
A complaint was made and an inquiry held by Lothian and Borders Police. The simple upshot of their investigation: unable to establish how the information got out, no prospect of a prosecution. In November 1991, Scotland suffered its most violent attack at the hands of animal liberation extremists. Research laboratories at Edinburgh University's Bush estate were extensively damaged in a firebomb attack.
The alarm was raised about 4:30 this morning, and 50 firemen fought the blaze for more than 4 hours. Fires also broke out in 2 other animal
Despite the
research
passage of more than 2 years, no arrests have been made, no charges laid, no one brought to book. But even as the embers cooled, police were collecting names.
People, as I've said earlier, who firebomb individuals and put human life at risk clearly need to be caught quickly. But solely because people who join this organisation give us names and addresses in confidence. So we didn't want to release those names and addresses, and our solicitors advised us not to. Within an hour, they were back with a warrant, and they took away our mailing list. I believe, according to them, they wanted to cross-reference our membership with other memberships of other organisations which they had in their possession.
Just where could such a cross-check be made? Where is the data stored? ARNI, the Animal Rights National Index, is maintained here at New Scotland Yard in London. It lists over 21,000 entries, the names and addresses of people concerned about animal welfare. But more than that, I can't tell you, for the police are extremely coy about their register. They won't say where they get their information, what the criteria are for a listing, and what they do with what they know. They will say only that they are answerable to the Home Office. The published material on animal rights supporters lists some 2,500 names, but the ARNI computer boasts a further 20,000 entries, giving details even of hair colour and other personal peculiarities. ARNI maintains it has absolutely no connection whatsoever with the animal testing or experimentation industry. But Scottish Reporters has obtained tapes of an ARNI representative, we have his name, giving a lecture in March of last year to members of that industry. In the lecture, he names individuals and organisations which have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism. And he goes on to tell them how they can best avoid infiltration by the animal rights movement. The tapes cast grave doubt on the impartiality of ARNI.
Something I want to speak about is infiltration, which I'm sure is very close to your heart. All I can speak about really is so far that what's come to light and what's come to the notice of our unit. She was formerly known as Louise Molyneux. She was actually employed as a campaigns officer for NOUS. She changed her name by default, put some down in her sort of appearance. I say she didn't obtain a job as a junior technician at Smith Langley.
Just why, you may ask, would a police intelligence unit amass such meticulous detail? And what happened to privacy? Some freedom of information or discussion by either the companies which do experiment with animals or by the police itself could very well throw up innocent explanations of some of the items that have come out in this program. But they don't speak. They hide behind the argument that they have a very real threat of violence to them by the Animal Liberation Front, the ALF.
After some 60 bombs against individuals by the animal rights extremists, the police have not even been able to arrest one person yet. In our view, the police powers are clearly insufficient to deal with this problem, and we've been pressing the Home Secretary to produce additional legislation on new police powers before some of the medical researchers are actually killed by these extremists.
Our view of animal rights is respect for all life, be it animal and human life as well. There's no doubt there always has been secrecy, the way animals are treated in laboratories, but this has now given the scientific community the cloak to hide behind. We cannot speak to you because if we put our faces on television, we will be attacked. I think it's a good excuse to avoid getting into debate.
Quite apart from the outrages of the Animal Liberation Front, there are, apparently, those happy to add to the loony fringe picture that so discourages and damages real debate. Scottish Reporters has obtained hard evidence of a determined attempt to subvert a perfectly legal campaign against the laboratory animal supplier. An agent provocateur urged violent action, seeking to put the campaign on the wrong side of the law.
He stressed that he had military skills, and he kept asking me, Robin, make the most use of my skills that I developed in the army, reconnaissance and so forth. I dismissed his talk as that of an eccentric, but as things added up, I became very suspicious, and on one occasion he attended an event where he wore a leather belt with a hunting scene on the buckle. So,
what did you find significant about that? Just not the kind of thing an animal activist
no
does?
self-respecting animal campaigner would wear a leather belt, particularly with a hunting scene, and certainly not the militant campaigner he was trying to make out that he was, suggesting continually that we should, as a group, get involved in more ALF-style activities.
Now, did he urge that course of action frequently?
From the start, he actually suggested it to individuals in the campaign group and to myself on occasion after occasion. We continually told him we were a peaceful campaigning group that worked within the law. We've been very successful in getting a lot of media coverage about the activities of this animal breeders and the export of animals all over the world, and we are very successful.
We have a secretly made video of one protest meeting during which persistent efforts were made to turn that peaceful protest into an illegal act.
We can go here the other way. All we can do is ask you to leave.
Going where? Here?
Back way, yeah. This big track runs down. All we can do is say, would you mind leaving the premises or whatever?
He actually showed me an extremely detailed map of all the alarm systems of B&K Universal, all the different security traps and so forth. It was an exceptionally detailed map on an A4 sheet. When I told him, I said, I've told you, Andy, on many occasions, that this is not the sort of group we are. He said, all right, well, give it to someone you know who would use it. Now, I refused to take hold of that map, and I feel to this day, if I had taken hold of that map at the end of this protest outside Banting Kingman headquarters, I would probably have been subsequently arrested.
What do you think he hoped to achieve by infiltrating your organisation?
It was a well-planned, well-organised, determined effort to subvert a legitimate and lawful campaign, animal rights campaigning. It's a sinister development, and we feel that the public should be aware that, you know, the right to protest, the right to freedom of speech is actually under threat from activities, sinister activities, such as, you know, we've seen in this campaign.
And that, for the time being, is where that particular story ends. The man in question has disappeared. Animal rights groups continue to be frustrated by a lack of information, and if it comes to that, the British public at large has no way of knowing exactly what does go on in these laboratories. The discussion has been driven underground. It's now a matter of fear, suspicion, and intrigue. And in addition, 21,000 people are on a Big Brother list, and they don't even know about it. And what of that terrorist in Edinburgh, the middle-aged woman running Dougal the dog, perhaps as an agent? We tracked her down and called. George from Scottish Reporters. May I come in?
Yes, do.
Okay.
Well, I'm an activist in that writing letters is definitely an animal welfare activity.
And how do you feel about being on a list of alleged subversives and terrorists?
It'd be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. I belong to a Christian Fellowship of Healing. I'm hardly going to go around planting bombs and blowing people up.